The 95 Libyans have been deported and their charges dropped. But under what conditions and circumstances were they in South Africa in the first place? How have we become such a hub for regional and international human trafficking? Remember the 90 Ethiopians kept under lock and key in a leafy suburb in Joburg? Unregulated migration has become a thorny issue for many South Africans. Just this weekend, the vigilante group Operation Dudula was in Soweto, shutting down spaza shops owned by foreigners, with police officers looking on. Then, of course, identity theft. Many South Africans say their lives have come to a complete halt because of stolen ID documents used by foreign nationals and subsequently frozen by Home Affairs. These are just some of the headaches facing the Home Affairs Minister, Leon Schreiber, who joins us now on the line. A very good morning to you and welcome back to 702 Breakfast.
Good morning, Bongani. Good to be with you again.
All right, so we've got a number of issues to deal with, so let's just go with them one by one as quickly as we can, if you don't mind. So let's start with the promised update. And I'm going to presume that Miss South Africa contestant debacle was probably one of the minor concerns you have on your desk.
Well, I mean, it's certainly, I wouldn't say it's minor, but it's not the only one on the desk. But we are tackling these things in a very focused way, Bongani. So obviously there will be issues that come up from time to time that require our attention. And at the same time, we need to focus on the sort of big reforms that addresses these problems at a systemic level. So when it comes to that particular case, and actually some of the other issues you've mentioned as well, I am going to be reporting back to Parliament in full because I believe that is really the appropriate forum where we need to report back to the people and engage on some of the questions and feedback. But as you know, we did pick up those indications, really serious indications of identity theft in the case of the person that we have registered as that contestant's mother. And so we're busy wrapping up the full investigation so that we can go back to Parliament and give the full picture. But I want to say, in all of these cases, these should be case studies for us. In other words, these things shouldn't happen and then they just go away and we move on and forget about them. They are all flags, whether it's the Libyan issue or this particular matter of identity theft, the blocked IDs. They are all indications to us of symptoms of a very serious illness that we need to tackle at a systemic level in Home Affairs. So I'm hoping we can use these case studies to really energize our reform efforts to prevent these things from happening in future.
Well, let's take them one by one. Can you give us an update on that investigation involving the Miss South Africa contestant? Who is it that's accused of the identity fraud?
Yes, as I say, it is the person that we've got registered as her mother on the Home Affairs system. But you'll have to excuse me on this one, Bongani. I'm going to keep this for Parliament because I think that's where the appropriate forum is for these kind of engagements. And I'm happy to come back and chat with you again after that.
All right. So many of the issues I mentioned in my introduction, one would argue, emanate from the department itself. Corrupt officials who often collude with syndicates, human traffickers, this issue of fake IDs and passports. And you'll know the Judy Zuma case, for example. She was charging 4,000 Rand per document. She processed nearly 200 of them, and those are the ones we know of, right? When you tally it up, she made almost R1 million, and she's just one example.
Well, she is an example. She's an example of what happens. She's in prison for the next 12 years of her life at least, and she is part of the clampdown that we are busy executing. There were actually a number of more convictions. An official last week was sentenced to prison for 5 years. More arrests have been made. So we are continuing the work to essentially clean up this department. There's no illusions. We understand that this is a serious problem. And even as much as we are committed to empowering those officials who want to do their work honestly and effectively, there is zero tolerance for corruption, and I think that message is coming across. However, again, the question we need to ask is why is it possible for these officials to manipulate the system? How does it work that one individual, as you say, can process 192 fake passports, which, by the way, we have blocked, but still, nonetheless, why is it possible for this to happen? And the answer is very clear to me, that we've got way too much discretion for humans to intervene in the system. So in other words, when things are paper-based, when they are not being tracked, when they are not digital and online, there is just far too much space for people to essentially exercise discretion and say, if you pay me something, I will process it in the following way. That is why the really fundamental reform we need at Home Affairs is digital transformation. We need to do what we've done at institutions like the South African Revenue Service before, which you'll recall was also very heavily paper-based 15 years ago, but has moved since to a watertight online system that has dramatically increased efficiency and reduced corruption. That's the direction Home Affairs needs to go. Digital transformation is where it's at.
Blocked IDs, no doubt, are a frustration, particularly, of course, when people's identity has been stolen. But surely if a citizen can prove their identity was stolen, shouldn't that be a quick and easy matter to resolve?
Yes, well, indeed. And, this issue has been allowed to spiral into a very large number of people that are affected. But again, we are taking very firm and decisive action now. We've gazetted an opportunity for South Africans who hold blocked IDs to approach the Department of Home Affairs, indicate that your ID has been blocked wrongfully. We will do a verification of the information, and if it's found that ID was wrongfully blocked, then it will be released. But at the same time, Bongani, a number of those blocked IDs are actually the product of the fraud that you are talking about. And so that is why we can't just ignore that because it does pose a security risk to the country. That's why we've said now, issued a very public call, and we'll be driving this message for the next month saying, please come forward if you're one of the people with a blocked ID, so that we can differentiate between people whose ID should actually be unblocked and those who are genuine security risks. And that's why we're saying those ones will be cancelled going forward. It's a big number that we're talking about, hundreds of thousands here, and we believe that will make a dent in the level of fraudulent activity we see with these IDs. And then I must say one more thing, if you'll allow me. Please, as for the people of South Africa, if you want to combat fraud at Home Affairs, the number one thing you can do right now is to go and replace your green ID book with a smart ID. You will find that the green ID book is far more susceptible to fraud. In fact, some research indicates it's the most forged document in Africa. So if you're carrying a green ID book, please don't put yourself at risk. Go and get a smart ID, which is a much more secure document.
If you don't want your ID, get a smart ID. Let's come to the 95 Libyans now. They've been deported, but there are wider questions around how did they get here in the first place? And surely one would assume part of the deportation is because they contravened immigration laws. Why were those charges dropped?
Yes, indeed. The deportation is based on that. We went through the court process to get that order issued. So the charges that were dropped do not relate to the immigration violations. Those are the ones that Home Affairs has pursued from the start. There were an additional number of charges that the police were looking at, and they'll have to account on those. But for Home Affairs side, we've executed on our mandate, which is the immigration violations, and we have indeed also conducted a preliminary investigation on this issue of the visas. Now, again, this is one of the things that I would like to report to Parliament, but what I can share with you, Bongani, is that, again, we need very, very urgent and comprehensive systems reform based on technology, because what you'll find is that some of these documents were handwritten. In the year 2024, how is it possible for someone to enter a country with a handwritten document? How easily can a handwritten document be forged? It is unacceptable. We are dealing also with issues involving the foreign missions. You cannot believe the number of complaints I get about that, because, of course, Home Affairs has been so dramatically affected by budget and staffing cuts over the last few decades that we can't have officials at all missions. And that has required very generous cooperations from the Department of International Relations. But of course, that creates a very difficult problem where there are DIRCO officials essentially helping Home Affairs at these missions, but not necessarily being under the management of Home Affairs. So this is really an urgent problem that needs to be addressed. Again, it's a case study for why we need to move away from all this kind of human interaction, handwritten documents, going to foreign missions. The technology is there in the year 2024. We must secure the system, we must allow online applications, and we must circumvent all these opportunities of potential fraud happening.
No doubt this is one of many conversations still to come. Leon Schreiber, the Minister of Home Affairs there, and can't update on everything, but that's what he can tell us. And of course, the trouble is, for many South Africans, it's not as if many migrants are even hidden in plain sight. You've got to ask questions about whether or not the Border Management Authority is making any difference. We'll speak to Leon Schreiber in the coming weeks, no doubt.
Current events, developing stories, Tough questions.
Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.